Hi, I'm Mike Holt with MikeHolt.com, and as always, I want to thank you for just taking the time to watch the video. And if you're watching it live stream, I appreciate that. And I'm looking for your feedback. Make sure you go to MikeHolt.com/live and post your feedback. All right, before we get going, just take a moment to thank God. He's blessed me beyond anything I could ask for. And I just want to be able to be honorable. And I'm not always an honorable guy, but I try anyhow. All right, this is an interesting email I got. Mike, the story about you getting kicked out of Dade County, Florida was, as an electrician, got me thinking. And that is a true story. I didn't get kicked out of Dade County. I got blackballed out of Dade County, which is the Miami, Florida area. As a result, I had to move to Broward County. And I lived in Broward County for many, many years. And that's because I was brought up in Miami. And another story there. Please do a video episode where you discuss the mistakes you have made. I'm sure this will be of value to the younger generation. And I got me thinking, I said, you know what? And I realized, wait a minute now. I have done that. And I've been taking my story and what I fails and my mistakes. And you realize success only comes from failure. The more mistakes you make, the more successful you become. And trust me, I've done a lot of mistakes, and I'm okay with that. I don't have a problem with that at all. So if you really want to change your life before you even get going in electrical, I don't care what it is. I don't care if you're in the electrical trade or not. If you just want to say, hey, how did Mike Holt, a high school dropout in a gang in Miami who didn't have a father, and if you go to MikeHolt.com, go to videos, click on, you'll see my story. How did this guy somehow make it to be who the person he is today? Well, there's a lot of parts involved there. I strongly suggest you get my life skills book and the DVD, as well as the MP3 that you can get with that. Go to MikeHolt.com. I don't know what the prices are of products, but you know what? It doesn't really matter what it is. Changing your life is what really matters. All right, so that takes care of that part of the business. I think it's a bong. I'm like, oh my gosh, you gotta be kidding me. So I get this message. It's a bong, Mike. It's a bong, Mike Holy smokes weed, LOL. And you'll notice that it's not here, this container that I had on there, it's not there because I was explaining it. And then my daughter, Belinda, who manages our offices, says, I believe this is a drug paraphernalia, a bong, that the guy referenced. And I'm thinking, I got my wife, I said, babe, is this a bong? We don't know what a bong is. And she goes, I don't know if it's a bong or not. I figured, like anything, if you're in electrical code, you need to know what the definitions are, right? Before you can even argue with anybody. So I'm like, what's a bong? Okay, that's a bong. And I don't know how you design a bong, but it looks like there's a couple parts. Number one, it looks like there's a vertical piece primarily. And I don't know what that's for. I guess you put your mouth on it. And then you have something on the side here. They all have little things on the side, right? Here's an example, good picture right here. I'm thinking, well, that kind of looks like my thing. And I took my thing and I took a picture of it. Look how that is designed. That's designed. It doesn't go straight up, but it does have a pouring feature. So I try to figure out, is this for pouring wine? Is this for pouring olive oil, vinegar? I don't know. It's just a decorative piece that we bought here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where there's a lot of artwork. So no, it's not a bong. Okay, let's get back to reality. Ready for this? Lightning protection review. I think this is fascinating the way we're working this out in the evenings. I'm having a great time, just so you know. It's a lot of work, but I'm really having a great time. And what happens is I discuss something, and then you say something to me. Well, what about this and what about that? Same thing happened with lightning. And I'm thinking, let's talk about lightning. Mike, from last week, are you saying that a lightning protection system is unnecessary and not a needed expense to a customer? I didn't say that. I didn't actually talk about it at all. Really, I just mentioned about lightning. I can't remember exactly what it was. We talked about lightning. I can't remember what the context was, but I don't remember saying anything about that. But I did talk about lightning with NFPA 780. Okay, let's review some electric discharge. Let's review the concept of what lightning is about. I did say that nobody knows what it's about, but there's theories. All right, all part of electrical theory, right? See if I get this out without... It's all electrical. You got to realize everything is theory. It's all physics. The whole National Electric Code is designed there because it has to accommodate physics. You don't know theory, you're going to make up all kinds of ideas why you think things are happening. And they're like, that's crazy. Ready for this? Electrostatic discharge. Electrons are negatively charged. Protons are positively charged. Electrostatic charge can occur when two insulated materials are quickly separated. So if it's a low humidity and you have insulated materials, like you have clothing, certain clothing, or you're in carpet, or you're certain locations, and you guys have all, I'm sure everybody has experienced electric shock. Maybe not so much where it's high humidity in Florida, but there could be some events in Florida where you'd experience that. What happens is as you're walking, you have two insulated materials, and as they separate, that you end up separating where the electrons actually kind of accumulate on one surface more than the other. And as they accumulate, there's always this electrostatic discharge. See, because the negative and the positive are trying to get balance. We're not going to get into the details right now, but that's the concept. You would get in a theory book, you'd understand that. For example, a person walking across a carpet in a low humidity environment can pick up enough high voltage electrostatic charge to reach tens of thousands of volts and have a high voltage electrostatic discharge arc to a positively charged, let's say, metal doorknob. Now, this is what's fascinating about electricity, is that this static discharge is in the tens of thousands of volts. And I know you're like, well, listen, in order to get killed, it's the current, and then there's going to be it's more than just simply voltage that kills you, right? It's the actual current, which is how many electrons are moving. We're not going to get into that detail right now because you're not going to get killed by touching something, okay? So I can't remember the distance, but I think it's about a ½ inch. And Eric Stromberg, I know you're on here. You can give it to us in the imperial number, not the metric number. I think it's about either ½ inch or ¼ inch. Maybe it's a ¼ inch. I think it comes out to be 14,000 volts. So if you kind of like get yourself all charged up and you go to something and you go to touch it, see if somebody can get an idea how, oh, that was about 3/8 of an inch. Well, then you can calculate the voltage. That's free, by the way. All right. So now, lightning. It's the same concept. You're having this in Florida, peninsula, right? You have the Atlantic Ocean and you have the Gulf of Mexico. You have a peninsula. It's getting heated up. Air rises, it brings in moist air from the Gulf and from the Atlantic, particularly in Central Florida area. As it rises, it goes into the atmosphere and it cools down. When it cools down, the moisture goes into condensation. It becomes damp. It gets into condensation, little droplets, and then they start attaching to each other. And as they get elevated, what's it, a 3-degree drop in temperature for every 1,000 feet? So if you go up 30,000 feet, I don't know what that temperature drop comes out to be. And then it becomes ice particles. The theory is all these ice particles are rising up and they're hitting each other. See, water is an insulator. Water is not a conductor. H2O. If you figure out the H2 and the O and you figure out that compound molecule, all theory, and you calculate the number of valence electrons, you'll find out that valence shell is pretty much full. And because it's full, it's an insulator. So now you have these insulators hitting each other and breaking apart. And you have some of these particles that are going to be more charged, some are going to be less charged. And because that electrostatic discharge, they're trying to equalize and get it back to where it's supposed to be. All right. Well, you could have cloud to air, cloud to cloud, cloud to earth, earth to cloud. We talked a bit about sprites. You can go online and find out about sprites, and it goes from space to earth, earth to space. And listen, nobody knows how this whole thing works. They're just having theories. Okay? That's what it is. All right. So now, how does it neutralize the charge? Well, that's right here. That's where the negative charges, and they kind of like, they try to balance each other out. That's a discharge, and that's how lightning works. Theory, anyhow. So now the concept of the theory is that as the air builds up, then you start picking up extra electrons on some parts of a cloud, let's say, and then you lose the electrons on the earth, let's say, in that particular area. That becomes positive charge. Then from the bottom, you're going to have these little things going up. If you could have like 3D glasses that can see streamers, you have all these little things trying to go up to try to get to the step-down leaders. And the greater the charge, the more electrons that you have, okay? I need to show more electrons here on this cloud as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Then guess what they do? So you have the step-down leaders trying to go down, trying to go down, trying to go down, trying to go down, and they have the streamers like, here, come to me, here, I'm me, pick me. And all of a sudden, somehow, they make a connection between the two. The theory is that lightning hits the highest object. Well, that's only if the electric static charge is above the highest object. If the electric static charge is over here, not on top of it, and it's trying to get to the earth, you know what it might do? It might just go to the side. It hit like the side of the monument, not the tip of the monument. So it's a matter of where is this charge going to be located at, and how does that work out? All right. There you go. That's what lightning looks like. We all know what it looks like. I tell you what, Brian, you remember that time we were at the company weekend and there was a lightning show for at least 45 minutes, if not an hour.
Right on the
that
beach.
The lightning struck, it must have been 200 times a minute. And I've never seen that in my entire life. And I don't know what that was all about and how that even took place, that it would take that long. So lightning can be dramatic, or you know what? There are places in the country where people have gotten killed. In Colorado, where a guy was running, on the other side of a mountain, there was where the charge came and went over the mountain and hit the one guy that was running. That was like, what, lightning out of the blue or something like that? So those things, we don't know what happens with lightning. All right. Well, what happens when lightning does make a connection? Well, lightning makes a connection to something that's combustible. See, lightning is not a voltage generator. Lightning is current. In other words, it's pushing electrons, which means it is a current generator, not like a generator. See, a generator is pushing voltage, and then the voltage results in current following it, where lightning results in current. And if you know what the current is, and if you know what the resistance is, then you can calculate out what that voltage is going to be. Okay? Not that it really matters. All we know is this. Lightning strikes a house in Florida. We get a lot of lightning. Or anywhere else in the country, or anywhere else in the world, and it's combustible. And that happens to be, look, it could have hit the tree, but it didn't. It hit the house. So, where's this a problem? Well, if you're in the gray area of the country, California, Oregon, and Washington State, not a whole lot of lightning. You see it's down very, very small. And of course, the color goes up to where it's even, I guess that's going to be pink or whatever color that is. Look right here. There's a little pink spot. Let me see if I can do it. Oops. So I have my house right there in Central Florida. Brian, you're same spot where I am. We're red. And then you have a purple, 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 which is just a little higher than normal. So depending upon where you live in the country, determines about how much lightning strike is going to hit you. It's called the risk assessment. What's the likelihood of this piece of property getting hit by lightning? Not only that, but what's the consequence of it getting hit by lightning? A house getting hit by lightning, burns down, probably not going to kill anybody. You're probably going to be freaking out. But what about if a lightning strikes, let's say a fireworks factory? Maybe you're somewhere over here in California and it doesn't really strike very often, but if it's a fireworks or if it's going to ammunition or gunpowder, maybe it's not high risk, but if it does, it's a problem. You might want to, somebody's designing these systems, they might want to consider that. All right, this is a little separate issue here. This has to do with how many people getting killed over a period of whatever 59 to let me see this, to 2007 is, and Florida has 500, Texas is 225, Washington State is 5. Okay, this just is like, well, do you think you want to be outside while it's thundering? You know, well, there's not much thunder in Washington. It just rains all the time. Well, if it's thundering, it might be an issue. Separate point. All right, so now what is lightning protection? Now, this is only a theory. Maybe it's true. Is that you put metallic terminals. They're called strike termination devices. Used to be called lightning rods. And I think they were called, I forgot what the other word was. But now the NFPA calls these strike termination devices. And you take the strike termination devices, and there's a formula. It's called the 300 feet diameter sphere, and how you can place the air terminal. So somebody goes to NFPA 780, they go to school, they become a certified master lightning protection technician, and they go around and they install these things if somebody needs a certified system. So the key is you put the air terminals and you tie them with conductors. And the conductors are braided conductors because lightning is a high frequency. Oh, Mike, it's not high frequency, whatever you want to call it. They don't call it high frequency, whatever it is. All we're saying is that from zero, the peak goes up so fast and then goes back down so fast that the current is expanding and then collapsing. And as a result of that, that causes the conductors to have high reactance. And so the inductive impedance of that conductor goes so high because, see, impedance is for inductive circuit is 2 pi FL, F being the frequency. So if you put the higher the frequency, well, then that means the current's not going to travel inside the conductor. It's going to travel where? Exactly, on the outside of the conductor, or the surface of the conductor, and they call that skin effect. All right, so now Because of that, you don't have a solid wire for lightning, because then you don't have a whole lot of surface area, because it's trying to travel on the surface. It's trying to have the skin effect. So then they have braided conductors. So there's a lot more surface area. Not that it really matters, because you're not doing it and I'm not doing it. But it's good to understand, why is their wire different than ours? Well, because it's high frequency. We work off of 60 hertz. Solid wire for us is generally fine. Now, the theory is that lightning will not strike the structure, but it will strike the, what is it called? Strike termination devices. And then it has its conductor going into the earth, and it does require 2 grounding electrodes. What's the practice? They drag ground rods. Okay? How deep should a ground rod is? I don't know. I'm not going to get into NFPA 780, because a 10-foot ground rod, there are no standards, the same thing, at all. So we're not going to get into NFPA 780. But they have at least two grounding connections in whatever NFPA 70 allows. Now, watch this. The fact that you have a lightning protection system, theoretically, should protect against this event. But the fact of a lightning protection system does not protect any of the wiring or any of the equipment on the structure. Okay? That means that if lightning strikes your electrical service and it doesn't strike the air terminals, well, your electrical system is toast. If lightning strikes the air terminals and it doesn't strike anything else and the electrons go to the earth, well, guess what happens? It goes from 0 amps to probably 30, 40,000 amperes very fast, and then it drops again. And what happens when the current goes up and goes down? It creates an expanding, collapsing magnetic field. That's an electrical magnetic pulse, an EMP. You have computers, electronic devices, dryers, everything in your whole house is working off of electronics. You get electrical magnetic pulse. And I know there's books written on EMP. Probably even have some bombs that are EMP bombs if you need to. That just wipes out all the electrical systems. And once you wipe out all computers, they got to surrender, because there's nothing they can do. Right. Another story. Don't have to go there. That's what lightning protection. No, it does not protect any of the wiring or any of the equipment inside the structure. Now, what happens when lightning strikes something that's not combustible? Well, there's some concrete. Right? It hit it, it's trying to go somewhere, and it happens to be the closest point, and boom, it just breaks it up. Now, this is supposedly a lightning protection system that actually Benjamin Franklin's company, because he was in the business with lightning protection, that he installed. And you can see, guess what? If lightning had hit this, clearly it hit the air terminal and it did not damage the building. If you've ever traveled internationally and you go to Europe, you will see lightning protection conductors all over the place on most of the important buildings. Because the last thing you want to do is have St. Peter's Cathedral, and I don't remember what's in St. Peter's Cathedral, but I'm assuming there got to be something up on top high. Usually churches have something high. Well, if lightning is going to strike something, it's going to hit that little puppy, and then guess what happens? It breaks it all up. So what do? They put air terminals, they put strike termination devices. They run a grounding conductor, take it to the earth, and then bingo. But that wasn't the question. Well, Mike, do you think we should do it? All right. I have a lightning protection system in my home in Florida. Why? Because I live in Florida. I don't want lightning to strike my house, particularly when I'm gone. Usually if something's going to go wrong, it's while I'm traveling doing seminars. Now, I live right now in New Mexico, which is probably right about right here. Oops. Santa Fe and New Mexico. So green, what is green doing? That would be dark green. That's pretty small compared 1 to 2, what is it, flash densities per kilometer a year, where in red it's 10. You know what? I don't have an air terminal, or I don't have a strike termination device on my house in Santa Fe, but I do have one in Florida. So do I think somebody should put a lightning protection system? Well, get a hold of a lightning protection company. They can do a risk assessment in there and determine whether you should do it or not. If I lived in Florida, yeah, I'm putting lightning protection in my house. All right. Hopefully that answers the question that was asked. Let's talk about air conditioning circuits. But before we do that, we got some questions?
Well, Mike, actually, Eric was Johnny on the spot. I just didn't want to interrupt you. He says it's about 9,500 volts per 1/8 of an inch for a arc through air. 9,500.
And I said a quarter inch, and I said 20,000. I said,
Yeah, you were close.
I said, what, 14,000? For half inch, I said 14,000, but he says an eighth of an inch, I'm writing this down, was 9,500.
1/8 of an inch.
Which means in 1/4 of an inch, it would be 19,000. Close to 20,000. Okay. So it's about 20,000 per quarter inch, or 9,500 per eighth of an inch. All right. Anything else? All right. Let's go to air conditioning circuits. I always know this drives people completely nuts. And I love driving people nuts, so it works for me. All right. This is an actual nameplate of an air conditioner at my house. And it showed minimum circuit ampacity 24.4, and it says maximum fuse, and if you look at that, it also says maximum circuit breaker. Sometimes they'll say maximum overcurrent protection device. So in this case here, they both happen to be the same value, 40 amperes. All right. So now, I actually changed this graphic from when I covered the previous one, and I changed the graphic to reflect this particular label. The other one only had 18 amps, and it did not list the fan of the condenser unit. So I actually got the correct label. It's 18.3 amps running load amps. The fan is 1/3 horsepower with a 1.2 full load current, and the label says 24.4 minimum circuit, 40 amp fuse, 40 amp circuit breaker, and we can come back over here, compressor 18.3, running load amps, 1/3 horsepower, 1.2. You guys follow that? So getting away from the label and getting in this example here. That being the case, I will put a 40 amp circuit breaker or fuse. Nobody's going to put a fuse. Well, why would you put a fuse if a disconnect? It's crazy. I put a 40 amp circuit breaker, and I would put 12 gauge wire, because when you go to table 31016 in the 2020 code, 12 gauge wire is rated for 25 amperes using the 75 degree C column. And I'm making an assumption, which I'm sure is 100% correct. I know somebody say, well, you know, your assumptions, well, guess what? I make assumptions and I'm comfortable with them. So you can change it and you can say, well, but I have to, whatever you want to call it, I have to call it something so I can do something with it. So I'm making the assumption, or I'm making a statement, that pretty much all terminals are rated 75 degrees C today. They're not rated 60 degrees C. So 110.14C1A1, actually I'm going to go to 110.14C1A3, and it says this: if you're under 100 amperes, if the terminals are rated other than 60 degrees C, then you can size the wire to the rating of the terminals. So therefore, I will be sizing this wire to 75 degrees C. There are no 60 degrees C terminals at all that I'm aware of, a brand new piece of equipment. And I say this because I'm hoping I kind of like piss off some of you guys because you think I'm wrong, which I might be, that you're actually going to show me. And then next week I'm going to say, guess what, guys? They do make some 60 degrees C terminal. And I need somebody to find it for me. That 60 degrees C terminals that in some way would have any effect of whether you change the wire size. Not like, do they make a terminal? That doesn't matter. All right, ready for this? Now, 244G says that we go to the air conditioning and we size in accordance with 440.4B. All right? Now, I got a feedback from somebody, Mike, my inspector says he doesn't allow 440.4B and you have to do the calculations in 440. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're going to be kidding me. All right, okay, fine. Well, let's take a look. What are the calculations in Article 440 if we don't use the nameplate values? And we're going to work it out. Okay, here we go. 440.22a tells us this. It says, look, you size a short circuit and ground fault protection device. It's not permitted to be more than 175% of the motor compressor current. We need to add some more text on here. Plus the other motors. Okay? So therefore, I would take the compressor current, 18.3 times 175%, plus the fan blower motor on that, and it comes out to be 33.225. Not to be more than. Well, if you can't be more than 33, then what size protection would you put on there? 30 amps. You with me? So, okay, well, see, you can't put 40. Hold on, don't get all excited there. Then 440.22a also says this: if the protected device size at 175, which is how many amps? 30 amps, is not capable of carrying the starting current, the next higher size up can be used, but in no case can it exceed 225% for the motor compressor current plus the other motors for a multi-motor. I'm not sure if this is actually the right code section. Matter of fact, let's take a look at 440.22. I'm looking at that. I'm not sure if that's the right, because you have to add the other motors to it. So 440.22, multi-motors. Okay, the compressor, motor compressor, whichever greater, that there's no 225%. The equipment terminal. Okay, I'll have to find a text on that. Can't find it quickly where you add the other motor load to that. That would be for single motor 22. Motor, largest motor. All right, I'll have to take a look at that again, or maybe the code just doesn't tell us what to do when you have more than one motor sizing the branch circuit. Combination load, maybe it's 440. No, it had to be 22. All right, we'll double check that. But you have to add the other motor. You can't just take the largest one, because that was a single one. We have to talk about the other ones. All right, so now you take the 18.3 times 225% plus the other motor, comes out to be 42.375, and it can't be greater than that value, so therefore we go to a 40 amp breaker. So guess what? The 40 amp breaker is how the manufacturers use this code rule to size that protection device. That's where the nameplate got 40 amps on it. That's the, one second, that was a protection device. Yeah, that's how you get the protection device. So 40 amp. Then we're going to size the conductors. Well, the branch circuit conductors to a motor compressor must have an ampacity not less than 125% of the motor compressor plus the current of the other motors. And that's what I was looking for back on 440.22, plus the current of the other motors. Some of you guys can find that for me in case I gave the wrong reference. So let's do the calculation. Well, branch circuit conductors, not less than 125% of the motor compressor plus the other loads. Well, you take 18.3 at 125%. Plus 1.2 comes out to be 24 amperes. And then there should be 110.14C1A3. We need to put it, oh, sorry, we got to cross this out here. Right here, A3, so we'll move this out of here. A3, which say table 310.16, 12 gauge wire, again, 75 degree C terminals. It's going to be 12 gauge wire. So, now, but here's the strange thing about this. I did the calculation, you see right here, and I came up with 24.075 amps. But if you look at the nameplate, it has to be 24.4, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? And I was trying to figure out what it was, and here's what it is. You take the 18.3 and you add the 1.2, that comes out to be 19.5, and you take the combined at 125%, comes out to be 24.4. So the manufacturer is actually specifying a larger conductor than actually is required. But we don't need to do the calculation at all because it's on the nameplate. So we're done? We good there? All right. Now, but Mike, what about the asterisk on 14, 12, and 10 gauge wire on table 310.16? Because there's an asterisk on that. And let's take a look at the asterisk. So here's the asterisk. We go to the note below table 310.16, and there's an asterisk. 240.4D shall be referenced for conductor overcurrent protection limitations. 240.4D is this rule that says maximum 15 amp protection on 14 gauge wire, 20 amp on 12 gauge, and 30 amp on 10 gauge. It's kind of strange, to be honest with you, that 310.16 would be referencing 240.4D and not all of 240. As a matter of fact, it's kind of strange that table 310.16 is even referencing overcurrent protection because 310.16 has nothing to do with overcurrent protection. And then it goes on. So you're supposed to go, section 244D shall be referenced for conductor overcurrent protection limitations, except as modified in the code. So this rule tells us you got to limit this, and then guess what? But the rule says this, unless specifically permitted in E through G, just so you know, G, which tells you to go to 440, and then we go to 444B, which means go to the nameplate, size the wire to that. Back over here. Section 244D shall be referenced for overcurrent protection, except as modified in the code. As a matter of fact, they don't even have to say that. They could just simply say, Section 244D shall be referenced for conductor overcurrent protection limitations. And when you get to 244D, it automatically qualifies and says, well, it doesn't apply when 244E or G applies. And so we don't need to have this except it's modified elsewhere in the code, because nobody knows where it's modified elsewhere in the code except where? 240.4. And then, okay, and then you have tap rules. And now you think, how about we get rid of the asterisk note completely, because what's that have to do with conductor ampacity in table 31016? All right, so that is why we do what we do, and we're fine. Brian, you have anything before I go off into something else?
Yeah, Mike, we got a couple questions here. A little bit of confusion on temperature ratings, terminal versus insulation, temperature rating. And I've got a comment here from Daryl, and he says, if running an M cable, doesn't the requirement of 334.80, the 60-degree rule, supersede the terminal rules if you're running to, say, a heat pump? So if you could just, you kind of said that, but if you could just kind of recap that real quick and put it in perspective.
Okay. All right. If we take a look at this example here, this is not Romex. Okay? If you're running Romex, then you have to follow the rules on Romex. And 334.80 tells us this, that you size the conductors to the 60-degree C column, regardless of the terminal ratings of the equipment. So was that Daryl who said that?
Yeah, that was Daryl, and he was saying, hey, if I'm running it to a heat pump, does the 334.80 rule limit the size of my conductor, was basically what he was asking.
Guys, when you run Romex, you follow Romex rules. Like you're in Rome, right? You follow the Romans. And 334.80 tells us that you size the conductors to 60-degree C column. So it's not a matter of something overruling something or not. 110.14c tells you one thing, and only one wiring method does this, and that's Romex. Why? Does the electrons know that they're running in Romex? No. That's because some people hate Romex. So they want Romex to have additional requirements that no other wiring method has to have. So it's just, trust me, I was there when this whole thing took place, and I'm not even going to go there. So when you get into Romex, and what I'll need to do then, Brian and Mike Horvath, give me a graphic here. I'm going to add another graphic here, because I would go to 334.80. We actually have a graphic of the air conditioner in Romex. As a matter of fact, where's my book? Oh, I can't. My phone is up there. Oh, I got another phone here. If you go, Daryl, you can do this right now. Go to my app, right? You just go to the App Store and you download Mike Holt's Electrical Toolbox. And if I go to Mike Holt's Electrical Toolbox, and I'm going to go over, I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go over to cooling. I'm going to go residential. I'm going to put a 40 amp breaker. I'm going to put 24.4 amps. I'm going to say it's done. Let's try this again. 24.4. That's pretty shaded. I don't like that. Okay, then I press enter. Let me show you something. Conductor size. Well, I'll try to show it to you. If you take a look at that, really careful. Can you see that it says 10 gauge wire? Brian, do you think you can see that? Okay, 10 gauge wire and also 12 gauge wire. So it gives you terminals. And you know what else? If you kind of go down here, see if you can see this. Can you see that in the notes, I give you the rule? Conductor size of the 24.4 amp nameplate minimum circuit. I say NM-SC cable. What does it say? Can you see that, Brian? What it says about NM and SC cable? What does it say? It gives you rules. So in my app, you could never go wrong. Because simply, if you're doing Romex, or if you're doing residential, now you're not doing residential and commercial in my assumption, my app. Okay, so that takes care of Daryl. Daryl, it's a good point and a good time to bring it up. Romex, 60-degree C column. If this was a Romex example, looking at the graphic there, that is going to be 10 gauge wire. Because it's Romex. Why? Well, it's because I hate Romex. Some people do anyhow. I love Romex. Anything else, Brian? Okay, Mike. So somebody else had a problem about the circuit length, because if you take a look at my app, let me go back to my app here. If you take a look at my app, I say, in this case here, that you can run that little puppy like 200 and something feet. It was Romex. Well, if it wasn't Romex, if I would go back, and I'm going to do this in commercial. In commercial, I don't have that stupid rule. I put a 40 amp breaker, and I put a 24.4 amp. Oh no, got to go back. That's what the problem is. 24.4. That gives me everything we talked about earlier, and this tells me my length. Now, the other day when I did it, the length, it was 184 feet because we had 18 amps as an example. But I really wanted this example to be more relevant, so I had it 18.3 and I added to 1.2 for the load. And so therefore it comes out to be a long distance. And somebody says, well, I got a problem with your app and you calculating the distance because it's really long. So let's go. So that's the app. You've seen that. We've seen the distance. We just talked about that. Now there's a note in my app. What I do is I have to explain everything, right? I mean, it's not fair for me to simply have an app. I don't feel it's fair for me to have an app and just go ahead and just give you information without supporting it. So in my app, I'm not selling anything, guys. This is free, okay? And if you don't like it, don't use it, right? Let's go. If you take a look at my app, first of all, I give you the answers in the top, right there, real quick, okay? And then I start giving you all the code rules. This is like the coolest thing to teach students. I give you all the code rules to support and all the references and 110.14 and 334. And I even give you the math and the voltage drop calculations. I give you, look at that. That's all the details to make sure. And if you don't think I'm right, go in that and you know what you can do? Click on email. Hey, Mike, you made a mistake or something like that. Look at all the details. Just for that silly little tiny air conditioner problem. But you got to have it right. At least I feel to have it right. Back over now to the voltage drop. This is what I'm doing in my app. I'm a code guy, okay? And that's the only way I approach this. You ready for this? Here's what I do for the voltage drop. Some people think that the code says you can't have voltage drop more than, the national code, more than 3% or 2%. That's an informational note that I don't really care about. All I care about is making sure I comply with the code, not an informational note. Okay? Here we go. Now, this is my note D, having to do with voltage drop. The voltage drop of the branch circuit is based on 110.3B of the NEC, which requires that the operating voltage at utilization equipment to be in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. So if you're going to supply, if you ever look at electronic ballast, you look at the nameplate, Brian, you taught me this. If you look at electronic ballast, it'll tell you minimum 108 volts. Okay? 108 volts. 108 from 120 gives you what number? 120 minus 108 gives you what? 12. 12 is what percent of 120? 10. So there is an ANSI standard C84.1 that says this, that the minimum voltage to equipment should not be anything less than 90% of the nominal system voltage rating, not the equipment voltage rating. So if you have 120 volts, ANSI C84.1 tells us that you have to have at least 90% of that voltage to that piece of equipment for it to be in compliance with the manufacturer's instructions, and that means you have to comply with 110.3B. So therefore, what is the voltage drop for a circuit? 10%. Now, what do I do with my app? Well, I don't know what the feeder voltage drop is going to be. So you know what I do? I say, you know what, the feeder is going to be 3%, which is the high end of the recommendation. That means that my branch circuit is going to be 7%. Had an email from a guy, Mike, I'm running one wire for a 13 amp load. I forgot how many feet away. And he asked me some question. And I said, 1 amp? I mean, 13 amps, he's running 1 amp. I did the math, it came out to be 6 gauge. Why? Because I was using 7% volt drop on the branch circuit. Now watch this. When you use the 7%, when you use my app, and you use the 7% voltage drop, you're not going to have a wire that's exactly that circuit of mills. So you're going to pick a wire that's going to be bigger than the voltage drop, and as a result of that, your voltage drop will never, ever be 7%. So that's what I use it. And that's how I get my distance. Let's go a little further. Here's the comment I got. Now this is based upon the example from last week that was based upon 18 amps, not 18.3 and not the 1.2 fan blower, okay? It's based upon that. Mike, if you run 184 feet of 12 gauge wire with a lock rotor current of 66 amps, you're going to have trouble. And I'm thinking, why would I have trouble? I mean, if the equipment says, hey, supply me within this voltage range, if I supply you with the voltage range not higher than it's required and not lower than it's required, it's going to start on the lock rotor current. There's not going to be a problem. After 20 years of service calls for blown fuses, I'm thinking, what's that have to do with the voltage drop? Trip breakers, overheated installed compressors, I'm like, yeah. Low voltage issues, utility and customer issues, hard start kits, contractor, capacitor, and compressor changes is why I would think this could be an issue. And I'm like, okay, you can think that if you want to, but I'm like, I go to the code book, I read 110.3b, I get to the manufacturers, I look at their equipment, they tell you what's the minimum voltage, I size the wire to give you the voltage they required. So I don't see that. Next one. Okay, my comment is, if a circuit is sized per the NEC and manufacturer's instructions as to the applied voltage, none of the issues described previously should be relevant. At least in my mind, I know physics, I don't see how any of those issues are related to me supplying voltage to equipment within the range of the equipment. Then there was another comment, same person made a comment, well, you know, you got a running current of 18 amps, 184 feet. It will result in additional energy costs to heat up the conductor. Well, that's true. I mean, if you run longer wire, well, you're carrying current in the wire, and the wire has resistance, and heat is a function I squared R. Yeah, you're going to have more heat on the wire. I'm like, okay, so I don't really care. With the AC being one of your biggest energy expenses, the payback for the customer in energy savings for a larger conductor would cover hiring an electrician who isn't thinking about dollars in his own pocket, but value to the customer. I'm thinking, I never would have thought of calculating out the energy of one size wire, comparing it to another size wire, and then going to the customer and saying, hey, listen, you know what? If you pay me more money and I'll get you a bigger wire there, you're going to actually save money in your lifetime. So I put together a little spreadsheet. Oh man, I got to open up the spreadsheet. Let me do that right now. And if you want the spreadsheet, just send me an email, mike@mikeholt.com. But do me a favor. I'm not answering your questions on the spreadsheet. You need to be able to read cells. If you don't know how to read cells, you don't get the spreadsheet. So here we go. Not sure what this is all about. I'll make this a little bigger. So let's assume, and I'm guessing, but here's my problem. This is useless. Let me tell you why it's useless. The person made a comment. She's an instructor, and she made a valid comment. That is that longer the wire and the greater amount of current, the greater the power consumption. Here's what I don't know is this. I don't know any individual point in the United States, let's say we're talking about the United States, that I could tell you how long the compressor would run during a year. I mean, I'm in New Mexico, and I'm going to pick New Mexico. I'm going to say, listen, I run 90 days of air conditioning, and let's say I have 5 hours of compressor runtime, right? It's like turning on an electric stove. Well, how much time is the stove actually on and off and on? A water heater, I can't tell you. So if I guess, which is a total guess, that it's 5 hours a day, because I only turn it on at nighttime, and I don't think the compressor runs very long, but let's say it was 5 hours. Well, if that were the case, then you'd have the annual cost, and then you have the distance of the wire and the resistance of the wire, and you go all the way down the line. I could save $5 a year. I'm like, okay. Yeah, but how much would it have cost you? Now you have to have, listen, I went to University of Miami for a business degree. I've written lots of books on business, okay? I understand estimating. I wrote a book on estimating. I understand how to price things. So for me to figure out, well, how much money would it cost me more so I can tell the person, you got to estimate, right? So I had the wire size, the labor hours. So you have to have labor hours to do it. So you have to know labor units, the labor rate, the labor burden. You need to know what the material cost is. So I had to look that up. The markup material, the overhead, the profit. You do a complete estimate. This is estimating. And guess what? You should know how to do this. Even if you're an electrician, you should learn how to be estimating and understanding the value of whatever you're thinking you're doing. So the 12 gauge wire, 184 feet long, wherever that's at. I guess I'm not showing in there. Back over here. It costs $244.65 just for the wire. That's what it would cost, the original installation. If you went with a larger conductor, well, that's going to affect your labor unit's going to go a little higher, which means the cost of labor is going to go more. And then you're going to have the labor cost is 121, and then you have the material cost is going to be a little bit more. And by the time you add material, so the material cost is going to be 110 versus $84. Add your direct material, it comes out to be $375. It comes out to be $126.74 more, assuming. Well, no, that's what the cost would be. So how many years would it take to pay it back? Well, it'll take about 25 years. Yeah, but Mike, okay, so maybe it's not worth it for you to take 25 years to pay it back. But don't you care about the planet and all the other stuff that's associated with carbon footprints and all that other stuff? I'm not even going to answer that question. Okay. What about if you live in Florida? 365 days and... What did I do with that? Okay, let me make this bigger. That's not bigger. Okay, let's come over here. I'll change 365, yeah. And Mike is going to run 14 hours a day. Okay, well, look what happens then. Well, now your payback period is what? 2 years. But here's my problem. I can't tell you how many days you're going to be running your air conditioner, and I can't tell you how many hours a day you're going to run it. I don't believe an air conditioner runs 365 days a year, and I don't believe the compressor is on for 14 hours a day. But I can't say you're right or wrong, but I don't know what it would be. So what would I do if I'm Mike Holt and my son came and asked me this question? I mentor him all the time. Well, here's a go. Since there's no way to know the actual runtime for the air conditioner, there's no way to determine the return on investment. I don't know if it's 2 years or 25 years. I would not recommend my son, who's an electrical contractor, have this discussion with the customer. Why not? Because he can't confidently tell you how many hours a day that compressor is going to run based upon the insulation of that house, the window, the orientation of the house, the humidity. There's so many variables. You have kids opening and closing the door. I don't know. But the instructor is correct that it does cost more, but I would never advise anybody to do the calculation. But guess what? If you want to do the calculation, Mike at MikeHolt.com. Mike, give me the spreadsheet. I want to do it. I know what I got to do. Well, then do it. Okay? Next one. Mike. I had to look over the clock. I need to get a clock right here, so I don't have to look over it. Mike, the NEC is in it. I'm sorry, Brian? Okay. Brian says, slow down your speaking a little and get a little excited. Sorry about that. Just watch the video again. The second time it's like, oh, now I know what he's talking about. Okay, Mike, I've heard this all my life. And you know what? I never thought about it until today or this week. Mike, the NEC is a minimum standard. How many of you guys have heard that? Raise your hand. Oh, yeah, I hear it all the time. And it's like, and I started thinking, because I got a comment in, well, Mike, the NEC is a minimum standard. You know, you shouldn't be like putting 12 gauge wire in a compressor, and then you're going to run that thing 184 feet, and then you're going to have voltage drop, and the place is going to melt down, and you're going to consume all kinds of power and all kinds of, it's a crazy thing. You should be putting, if you cared about the planet, if you cared about people, if you're a qualified electrical contractor, you put a bigger wire in there and all that other stuff. Because the NEC is just a minimum standard. I'm thinking, maybe you guys can help me, and I really do need you to help me now. Get your keyboards out, get it all ready to go. I need feedback from you now. I can't think of one case that I can think of that I would do something more that's required by the NEC. Help me. If the NEC is a minimum standard, well, Mike, the NEC is a minimum standard, you need to go above the NEC. What would you do above it? Do you put a strap not within 36 inches? You put it within 24? If you have to support it every 10 feet, do you support it like every 8 feet because you're 25% better? Are you putting less wires in a box than the code requires because that's better? Are you putting bigger wire? Are you putting 12 gauge wire in a residence when it only needs 14? I mean, why? So if you're going to tell me the NEC is a minimum standard, here's what I think that is. That's just a bunch of BS. I think that's just people saying something because they don't like what the code says, because they don't like what it actually says, which is to accommodate the physics, and it doesn't say what they thought. They want to be able to say, well, the NEC is a minimum standard. You need to go above the code. And it's kind of hard to argue that logic, except here's the problem. Number one, I don't know what you could possibly do greater than the NEC requirement that would make any sense at all. And not only that, who's paying for this crazy thought process? Are you paying for it? The one that's making that stupid comment? Sorry to bother you. Are you paying for it? Or do you want somebody else to pay for it because you think somebody else should spend money to do something more than required by the code? So this is a challenge to you guys that have been saying this. Give me an example. So you say, well, Mike, this is an example. You know what? You're right. So Brian, are we getting anybody? So while you guys, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'll let you think about that and kind of see get pissed off of me, and I'm okay with that.
All right, guys. I don't know what's going on. Maybe Mike's battery went dead. His microphone just went crazy here on us. I apologize about the squeaky sounds. While he's checking his battery, I am going to... no, we can't hear you. You're still squealing, so turn it off and back on maybe.
All right, I can do that. All right, you talk to him.
So, shout out. Let's see. We've got EIQ. I notice EIQ's got a watch party going. We've got a couple of different apprenticeship programs watching again tonight. Shout out to Ron Pelkey with Power Design. Sent a nifty little spreadsheet. I can't wait to look at that. And then a few other guys saying hi. Just hi to all you guys. It's a great privilege to have you here.
He's all right if he wants to start back up.
Okay, you're all set.
Well, who knows? All right. Don't know what with the squeakiness deal is. All right, so I tell you what, until somebody can come up with some logical reason why you suggest somebody else should spend more money for your idea, just like, the efficiency of having a larger wire and lower reduce the cost, what's the return on an investment? We found out that, that's not going to work because you have no number. All right, so we got a comment from research. Whenever I get a comment from research, we have a research department. I never like that. I never liked that at all.
Research says...
All right, let's go. What's a comment?
Research says, I consider wire size for savings on industrial roads because many of them run 24 hours per day for 5 to 7 days a week. The payback is typically a couple years, assuming the larger conductor does not require an increase in the raceway size.
So my spreadsheet does have value, maybe not for an air conditioner because we can't predict the load. Is that right? But if I'm in industrial processing and I have something that I know is on and I know how long it is on, told it, hey, let's do this. Let's go 365 days. Let's go 24 hours. And it doesn't matter what's an air conditioner, it doesn't matter what it is. It's just simply like, okay, whatever this load is, if you're running 24, 365, look what the return on the payback is. That's 1.26. That's not bad. You know what I would do? I'd add another column, which would be 8, 6, 4, 3, 2, just to play with that to find out, hey, holy mackerel, you're better off, whatever the case may be. So I'm going to take back 25% of what I was thinking about that previous comment. I think that comment, research brought it up, really, really helpful. Not related to an air conditioner, but what's really related to is like efficiency and savings. And so I'm going to take back pretty much everything I said. The air conditioner I don't take back because I can't predict that one. But when it comes to a load that is given, that you know the current and you know the duration, then you can do that return on investment. And you should get this spreadsheet. I was just going to delete it, and I'm going to keep it. Thanks, research. Hey, I'm waiting for stuff from you. All right, Brian, anything else? All right. I'm going on unless somebody, oh, it says I'm done. All right, good, because I wonder what's next.
Well, I didn't want to send you down
Okay.
a rabbit trail until you were done with what you were going to cover. But we've got some questions. So when you were talking about conductor sizing and ampacity, there was a question that says, why can I run smaller wire for residential versus table 310/16? A lot of people are excited that 310/16 is back. I don't think they realized it until you mentioned it. So yes, table 310/16 is back. It is back in the 2020 code. So why on the residential table are we allowed to run an even smaller conductor than on the table 310/16 ampacity table?
You're talking about table 310.12.
Yes.
Why do we have a special rule 310.12? Guess what? Scheduled for Thursday, May 21st. Guess what the first thing I'm talking about? Residential service and feeder conductor sizing. So if you wonder about that, I got a lot of slides as a whole conversation about that. And you're gonna like, So I got that answered next Thursday. By the way, tomorrow, Wednesday, I'm covering the electrical professional's career from being an entry level to all of a sudden making millions of dollars. If you want to make a lot of money, you want to be successful, you want to be secure, there's two things that can make you the most amount of money. Ready for this? Number one is your health. If you're not healthy, doesn't really matter, because guess what? You're going to be spending all kinds of money in medical expenses, and then you're not going to be producing income. Number two is education. But it's not just education, it's the right education directed to a specific purpose. So tomorrow, if you want to take your career to the ultimate level, and you want to have a lot of money, and you want to have a lot of free time, and you want to be happy, I got the formula. The system works. It really does. So that's what I'm covering tomorrow. Okay, comment.
Well, actually, Mike, I just wanted to jump in here. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we still have a discount code that works this month, and you haven't mentioned that. I don't think you mentioned that last week or today. So maybe we want to let everybody know about that.
Okay. Don't buy anything yet. Watch tomorrow. Then you're going to get a super discount, and you'll know what you're supposed to buy and when you're supposed to buy it. So I'm going to take you, hey, listen, I just got in the trade. I've been in the trade 3 months. Hey, Mike, I've been in the trade 15 years. What do I do? Where do I go from? That's what I want to do tomorrow. And I do need you to help me. I need you to ask me your questions. If you could, send emails to mike@mikeholt.com, some scenarios. Hey, Mike, and give me your story. And then I can use those as examples as to what would I do and what would I recommend and where would you take your strategy. So the discount code is 30% off, and you type in the discount code LIVE, L-I-V-E. But don't do it now. Wait till tomorrow. Then you know what you're going to do. Are we done, Brian? Anything else? All right, guys. Hey, that was a really good thing, research, to bring my value and bring the concept of what the instructor said, that we really need to consider that. And so I don't know how you sell that unless you're in a factory and you have your own control and you got people like you, very, very smart, that would be designing a system. So that's a pretty good idea. But you know what? There's the example of why you do something above the code. Perfect. So I was wrong again. All right, guys. See you tomorrow night.